When we wake, hear the birds and see the sun. Side by side our fears are done. Oh, the good times just begun. Oh, we know what we have, let's hold on tight. Found what we're looking for in life. Call us crazy, but things are finally right. With you and I, the future is bright. Sleep, hear the crickets, see the moon. Side by side and through. No limit to what we can do. Oh, we know what we have, let's hold on tight. Found what we're looking for in life. Call us crazy, but things are finally right. With you and I, the future is bright. Oh, you and I, we got it. Oh, we don't need no more. Oh, even in the hard times, you and I can weather any storm.
Welcome everybody to Lunch Therapy Interview Friday with Jack Grapes. This has been a long time coming. I have been looking forward to having Jack Grapes on the show, trying to get a hold of him. I think it was must have been about 4 years ago, or maybe 5. I was at Patricia Arquette's house, and someone was talking to me about this great writing teacher named Jack Grapes, and it was like she had met Jesus or something. She was so excited about it. I don't remember who the person is. If the person happens to be watching the show, maybe they should tell me, because that would be great to know who that was, so Jack can pay her off. And yes, it's just wonderful to be here. Greg Wordle says, "What's up with the weather, Marshall? Been in California for almost a week and the weather is not living up to the advertised sunny California." I know, it is crazy here. I don't understand what we're gonna do. I hope this is not setting a precedent. I might have to move back to Seattle, where the weather is nicer. Grapes is great. Howard Aronin, comedian, is here. Hey everybody, so really great to be here. Really happy to be talking to Jack. Just want to say a few things before we get into this thing. Carrie Ockery, who we had on the show. Wonderful grunge goddess. You can see her here. There she is. There's a Bloss's chair for some reason. But behind me is the show that she was on. But now behind me is her podcast, Between You and I, which is the grammatically incorrect title of her podcast, which she knows it is, and I'm not sure why it's called that. But I'm the guest on episode 36, so check it out. Susanna Spies is here. Susanna, it's so great to hear from you. She is also someone that knows Jack. Susanna was on the show, and I wanted to mention that as well. There's Susanna's episode 265. Check that out. We've got to get her back on the show because she's got a lot to tell us about, I think. She's been working on a one-person show. She's a hilarious comedian. Let's get into this thing called Lunch Therapy Interview Friday. I'm gonna get myself a modem. 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 For those of you that haven't seen the show, Joel Marshall's Lunch Therapy, now you're going to experience the breathing section of the show where we take in 3 deep breaths because it calms my nervous system and perhaps will help yours as well. So here we go. In through the nose, out through the toes. Hold it. Let it go. We always do this at the top of the show. It's my favorite part a lot of times, but not today. Today my favorite part is going to be if I can get Jack to read some poetry. In through the nose, out through the toes. Hold it. Julia is here. Great to see you, Julia. Let it go. Happy Friday. Walkmeister, GT, great to have you here. I love the names that people come up with. In through the nose, out through the toes. Hold it. And let it go. All right, shake it out. This is Healing Vibrations. They're one of my favorite YouTube channels. Anybody wants to go over there and subscribe, I highly recommend it. They play crystal bowls. They do things that make you feel good. And we like to feel good here on the show. Now we're going to get into the interview. Interview Fridays. Just so you know, Fridays we have interviews at noon. And Tuesdays at noon we have wacky game shows and variety show. And this show is like, it's almost like two shows. Cluster fan is here, nice relaxing sounds. Yes. All right, so let's get into the interview portion of the show. Jack has been in the green room with my assistant, Boney. Boney is the skeleton that you saw in the intro to the show. So, Jack Grapes. We're going to find out a lot about him today. At this moment, I want to make sure that I say happy birthday to my mother-in-law, Liz Lopez. It is her birthday today. And then my wife, Kamala, her birthday is tomorrow. So I want to say happy birthday to y'all. And now I've got a birthday present for you. His name is Jack Grapes. Laura Dern said about my guest writing technique, what a treasure. Method writing is that it is a brilliant lesson in connecting and staying true to one's voice. From that place, the writer can go anywhere. It is the core teaching that has made me passionate about acting as well. So that's a big thing because I think we all love Laura Dern, right? And if she says that has made her passionate about acting, wow. I recently saw a play by Jack Grapes, and I'm going to give you the link. I'm going to put it in the show notes. But what he said to me was, You got to sit down with your top hat and popcorn and watch this thing all the way through. And it is a recording of a play called Circle of Will that he performed in, played William Shakespeare, and co-wrote with Bill Kakmus. And it is described as a bizarre metaphysical comedy, but I just welcome you to just enjoy it, because take an hour and a half and sit down. I would never recommend watching a videoed play except for this one. This one is, I don't know, I can't say enough good things about it, and I don't want to say much more about it because I want you to experience it. So that, if you haven't seen it, you got a treat coming up for you. It actually ran for several years in Los Angeles, which plays that run for several years barely even happens. Won the Theater Critic Awards for Best Comedy, Best Performance. Los Angeles Times called it a play that goes way beyond mere entertainment. Grapes has created an intelligent piece of theater which peers into the very foundations of drama itself. It's one of the cleverest original works seen in a long time, and I agree. But that's not all there is to Jack Grapes. Jack Grapes is an award-winning poet, playwright, actor, and teacher. He publishes this journal called On the Bus and has won several grants and fellowships in literature from the National Endowment of the Arts. He has written 24 books of poetry, including a haiku collection with an introduction that's longer than some books. This is called Wide Road to the Edge of the World. I just got my copy. I got some reading to do, I'll tell you that. But I've looked through it and read some of the haikus, and it's really wonderful. We'll ask him about that. I'm going to just get into this now because I could talk for an hour about the accomplishments of this man. So let's get into this thing, Interview Friday. And there he is, Jack Grapes. Oh no! Something happened to your eyes. What are we gonna do?
Hey Joe, how you doing?
Welcome to Lunch Therapy. I think you've been, I don't know, you and Boney have been.
I just had my eyes dilated. I had to get a new pair of glasses.
I see.
And I don't know. I let me take these glasses off. Oh, now I can see so much better. Ah, yes.
So much better. Oh my gosh. How are you doing? Welcome to Lunch Therapy.
Wow, what a nice introduction you gave me. That was really nice. I appreciate that.
Well, you're worth it. I mean, my gosh. I was saying to Jack, because we did a little technical thing run through last weekend, and I was saying to him that I do a deep dive on my guests, and I got to tell you, I have just put my toe in the water of all the things that you do. And it's just remarkable. I can see why whoever this woman was who was telling me about you, I can see why she was so effusive about you. And so I'm just glad to have you here. And thanks for being here on Lunch Therapy.
Well, thank you for asking me. I appreciate that. I really do.
All right. Well, okay. So I want to start from the beginning because apparently you were in Second City in the 60s or something. Can you tell me about that? Because that piqued my
68, 69, for a relatively short period of time. And then one of the guys in the company, Alan Yosny, had been my partner in a comedy team. Mm-hmm. And we had played nightclubs and, things around the campus and whatnot. And shortly after that, we got a pilot for a comedy show in Los Angeles, in Hollywood. And so we left, and that's how we ended up in Los Angeles. I don't know where we would have gone there, because I was wanting to be an actor, something I'll go to New York. And, it's and Alan's a funny guy, but he's also like a CEO, he's business. He mm-hmm. runs companies. So, the two of us were an odd combination.
Hmm.
And then we ended up in LA and did some more comedy. And eventually, I went more into my acting, and he eventually became head of Quinn Martin Productions, and he continues to do consulting and things with, companies and stuff like that. So,
So both of you came out here to do a show. Is that right?
yeah, it's going to be a comedy show with a company called Filmation that did
Hmm.
Saturday morning
Of course.
cartoons,
Yeah.
and they were going to do something called, which was at the time kind of new, called rotoscoping, where they could have comedy, the cartoon,
Yeah.
but they could also filter us in our real bodies.
Hmm.
And it was going to be a comedy thing like, Abbott and Costello, or, whatever, Hegel and Marx, things like that. And it never got off the ground.
Hmm.
Um, but it was a good experience. We had a good experience.
Oh, that's cool. So were you planning on coming out to Hollywood? Like you want to be an actor? Were you like, someday I'm going to move? You came from New Orleans, right? New Orleans
Yeah, and
originally?
I never thought, even though I watched a lot of movies, I was a big movie buff, and Hollywood was, a place. I always thought I'd go to New York, and um, it just happened to work out that way, that someone recommended us to the guys at Filmation, and they flew us out to audition. So we flew out just to audition.
Wow.
We got off the plane, we got our map out, we drove to where they were in Reseda, we went into their office, we did our comedy sketch, and they liked us. They thought we were funny. Matter of fact, one of the things we did for them, you can find on YouTube. If you search YouTube, Grapes and Allen truck driver.
Okay.
That was one of our signature bits, where we were two truck drivers driving across the country at night trying to stay awake. And, we're both falling asleep. And it's a funny bit. Go
Sounds good.
YouTube, search Grapes and Allen. That's two L's,
Yeah.
truck driver, and it'll come
Okay.
on. It's kind of funny.
We'll have to do that.
It's a good bit.
Okay, so you went to school for theater and then you went to Second
Yeah.
City. When did you start writing? Or
Well, I
have you been
started writing when
forever?
I was 12.
Yeah.
I read comic books a lot, and my dad, who was a reader, even though he never went past eighth grade, my dad was very smart, read a lot. He had a little den with a library, and I read books in there. But I read comic books, and one day he came home and he just got fed up with me, and he gave me two books. One was a science fiction book by Robert Heinlein called Something to the Stars, and the other was a Perry Mason mystery,
Hmm.
and that hooked me. And then I started reading all the science fiction and detective stories I could get, and I started writing stories when I was 11 by hand, and I would staple them and make little booklets out of them. And he bought me a Royal portable typewriter, and then I got carbon paper. Carbon paper, I was like Gutenberg. It was
Yeah.
like no, really. I learned that I
mean?
could get very thin onion skin and type on it, and that way I could get 6 carbons. The
Oh, yeah.
last carbon was almost like the ink had run out.
So you had
But
copies of your work? Is that what you're saying?
yeah, I would staple them, and then I would have like 6 copies.
Yeah, that's
And I
great. You were a
learned
publishing
somewhere
company.
what?
You were your own publishing company.
Well, yeah, I was kind of making my stories, and I would bring
I
them.
like
They were
that.
usually murder mysteries, and I would bring them to school, and the kids in 6th grade would read them. And I learned that if you print something in more than 6 copies, you've got to register it or something like that. But anyway, I had the copyright thing on it, and I started drawing pictures to go with it. That was my thing. I had this typewriter, and I was writing. And my goal every time I wrote a story was to see if I could do one that was more pages. So I was
Why?
writing novels. I
Yeah.
wrote about 10 novels,
Yeah.
and I finally got to where I wrote one novel, the last one, called The Train of Fate. They're all up in a box up in my attic.
You have them.
Uh,
Oh, that's great.
that one was 215 pages.
Wow.
So I wasn't thinking creatively in that sense. I
Yeah.
was thinking,
Pages.
can I write more pages for my next novel? Because I wanted to get something nice and thick.
Oh my God. So what was your inspiration to do this writing? Was there somebody that was like your mentor or somebody that you were like, I want to be like this person?
Well, like I said, I started just writing little stories by
Yeah.
hand,
Yeah.
and I don't know. I don't think there was a. I can't think of a mentor or
Hmm.
an inspiration. Somewhere in me, when I was 11, um, I had that creative thing.
Yeah.
Whatever that thing is, if anybody, if ever you have a panel of artists, painters, actors, composers, musicians, what is it that drives you to make things out of nothing?
Yeah.
So every summer between classes, from the time I was in sixth grade to high school, senior year, was the summer I would devote to some artistic endeavor. One summer I got a lot of clay at an art store, and I made sculptures out. I made sculpture out of the clay. Another summer I started painting, and I got canvases and oils, and I would copy some of the masters, try to paint like them. And I had a whole bunch of canvases in my room. And writing, I was always trying to make another book, another book, another book, and whatever the problems might be in the artistic realm of it, but it was also just trying to make a bigger book, a bigger book, a bigger book. And along the way, there were artists, there were writers and artists like Van Gogh, who, for whatever reason, when I read about their life, they influenced me and inspired me. Um, but I don't think I had any one thing that made me want to be a writer. The thing I remember most, when I was 6 years old, there was a hurricane, and there was a poem I read in a children's book. It was called, well, it was anonymous. It was called "A Purple Cow." I never saw a purple cow. I never hoped to see one, but I can tell you anyhow, I'd rather be, I'd rather see than be one. And I was 6 years old. I remember there was a hurricane outside, and I read it, and it so astonished me with the language. It wasn't the rhyme as much as the idea of it. When it said, I never saw a purple cow, I never hoped to be one, but I can tell you anyhow, I'd rather see than be one. And I understood, because I grew up in New Orleans, the nature of prejudice and discrimination and having to get on the bus. And if you were African American, you had to sit in the back. And so to me, the purple cow would have been the marginalized person. Yeah, you might want to see them, but you don't want to be them.
Hmm.
And I knew that that's what that poem was about. But I also, it was like an electric jolt. The, there was the rhyme at the end, but the rhyme in the middle of the last line, I'd rather see than be one. And one rhymed with the end. It wasn't like I became a rhyming poet, but the way words worked, it just thrilled me. And I was not a very precocious uh, writing type kid with English. I didn't pay attention much in school. My father drank a lot when I was very young. He was an alcoholic. He and my mom fought a lot. And when I went to school, it was hard for me to pay attention. I was always worried that my father might drive and get into an accident and kill himself or something. I didn't pay attention much. I remember in second grade, I got put in the row. This teacher, Miss Cook, lined up the rows in the classroom according to whether you were an a B, a C, a D, or an F student. And I was in the F row along with Jimmy Sharavella and Gene Grasser. Jimmy Sharavella today, well, he's my age, he's probably retired, was a brain surgeon, and Gene became a big insurance salesman. But we were all in the stupid row.
That happened to
And I
me too. That same thing happened
remember
to me.
that.
They like divided the classes between the like slow, medium, and smart students. And I got put in the slow one, I think because I was ahead of myself in grades. So they put me, but I'm telling you, being in that F row, it also puts you in a place where I feel like you're interpreted differently by the teachers. Like when you do things, I found a stick on the playground and they thought I was a bully. You know, I wrote my name down the side of the page instead of at the top. And, you know, in the smart class, that would be creative. In the dumb class, you're trying to be subversive. You know?
Yeah, you're always reacting to some identity that you were given that you feel was not you.
Yeah.
And I think I carried that idea that I was stupid basically all my life. The thing that provoked me to want to know everything, this is why I read anything, is because I want to know everything so I won't be stupid.
Yeah.
And that has been a big push for me. But when I started writing those little stories, I think that was my way in my solitude. Because even in the classroom, I felt alone. I felt I didn't, teachers would talk. I remember in third grade, the teacher told us all where the bathrooms were. And I just didn't listen to it. I was in this bubble of numbness.
Yeah.
And one day I had to go to the bathroom toward the end of the class and I didn't know where it was. And I walked around the school looking and I couldn't find it. And then I came back to the classroom and I sat there 5 minutes to go before the bell rang. And I just sat there and peed in my pants.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'll never forget what she told me. I'll never forget this. Third grade, whatever that is, 8 years old, 9. I just sat in the chair when everybody left, and she said, "Jackie," they call me Jackie then, why aren't you going out? And I went, "I peed in my pants." Like that.
Yeah.
And I thought she was going to say, "How did you do that? What happened? Oh, my God," whatever. The first thing she said to me was, "When you go out to the school bus, carry your school bag in front of you and no one will see your pants are wet."
Oh.
She went right to the meat of it, which was the real concern, not how did you do that and why did you do that and whatever.
Yeah.
This is how none of the kids will see it and you won't get made fun of. I never forgot that. Never forgot that.
She was protecting you.
I'm just saying, I was in a fog, and then once my dad got me those books and the typewriter and I started writing, that's who I was.
That probably happens to a lot of creative people there. I remember being in class and trading papers back and forth with a friend of mine where we draw, like one person would draw a line and the other person would make a picture out of it. And then the other person would draw a line. And that was, for artists, that's part of your development. But when we got caught, we were just in trouble and it was like bad and, sent to the principal's office or whatever. So sometimes that happens and you don't have perspective on it. But a lot of artists find things like acting and writing and things because they're like a troubled student or they don't quite fit in.
Well, I think that's why I bifurcated the way I responded artistically in the world. One part of me was very isolated and solitary. And I understood the fear of the nights when you're afraid that your father won't come home or, that whole darkness. And a lot of my writing came from that dark place. But the way I survived in school was to be the class clown.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I would go to school with all that angst in me. But if I could be funny, then that would be a way for me to relate to others and get a kind of an identity for myself. So I became a clown. And so my two, like I said, Alan and I, even in high school, we morphed into being comedians and went to college and whatever we studied, we were the college comedians. Anybody who went to Tulane at that time knew who Grapes and Allen were. So there's a kind of an undercurrent in my poetry that's comic.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
In some ways, there's an undercurrent in my comedy that's like Circle of Will, which you saw. There's an undercurrent in that's really not funny at all.
I know. And I'm telling you, that play just really resonated with me. You told me, "Joel, I'm going to send you this link and I want you to read all the material in the email. And then I want you to put on your top hat and have your popcorn." And I was like, I got to fit this in somewhere in my busy schedule or whatever. And I'm going to watch it. And you said, watch it all the way through. So I
Yeah.
sat down at 1 o'clock in the morning to watch a play on YouTube, which
Wow.
most of the time you would be asleep in half an hour. I was riveted by this thing. And it was also so up my alley, you know, like, because I love
Yeah.
Shakespeare, and I don't want to talk any more about the play because I want other people to experience it as
But it
it
kept
is.
changing on you. It kept
Oh my
changing on
God,
you.
I loved it. And yeah, it was always kept me interested. And yes, and I understood like I didn't have a top hat, but next time I definitely will wear a top hat. And and then you were saying like you're gonna want to be looking at your program, like all the things that you said was.
Did you see that moment when
Yes,
everyone's looking at their program?
absolutely. So I'm going to put a link in the show notes. Also, you can subscribe to Jack Grapes' newsletter on his site, jackgrapes.com. And hopefully they'll send you that as well out in the email. Maybe you can send that one out again, because that is amazing. And I'm so glad that somebody captured it. It's not the greatest video of a play because it's really hard to video a play.
We shot it closing night.
Yeah.
At the last minute, we got a videographer who had never seen the play. So
Yes.
he didn't know what to, where to move the camera. It wasn't like we had a 3-camera thing and then we edited it. This was just one home movie shot.
I have to tell Annie Wood what the name of the play is.
It's what it is. What it is. It's all we got.
Annie Wood is like going, come on, guys, tell us what the name of the play is. The name of the play is called Circle of Will. Circle of Will. And
so we get the play on Will Shakespeare.
Oh yeah.
And I play the character of Will.
Yeah.
We never say it's Will Shakespeare. It's just Will.
Yeah.
But you also get the idea of will, to will something, to will something. And the circle is because I can't tell you.
That part.
Because
of the old globe. Because the old globe was a circle. That's why.
I don't know if you realize it, but where we shot it, where we performed the play that time, was in a 1/3 replica of the old globe, including the trap door.
Really? That was also what was so fun about it was because, there was so much going on the stage. You could go up in the top, you could peek out of the curtains.
Yeah, that was just like the original globe. You could go up top.
It's such a genius play.
Stairway.
So Circle of Will. Also, Circle of Willless or something is the circle in the brain. Right. Did you think of that too when you named it that? Because that's kind of interesting as well.
Kind of. But that was not I knew that, but it was more the idea of the roundaboutness of
course,
whatever.
Of the theater.
Anyway, I don't want to give it away. Because,
I don't either. Anyway, so that's enough about that. But I do want to find out, like, okay, so you moved to Los Angeles. Los Angeles is very different than most other places. You hadn't planned on coming here, but all of a sudden you were there. So we
got a pilot for a TV series.
No, but I'm saying like then the TV series doesn't go, and so you're still in Los Angeles. So you decided to make a home of it. Was it hard to adjust to Los Angeles? You've been here ever since. Did you just immediately love it, or what?
No. I used to go back home every 6 months. I just missed the city I grew up in. New Orleans is an artistic city. It's a very unique city. Yeah. I had all my friends were there except for Alan. And then we had a couple of other actors from Tulane who came out, but it was slow going. I got involved in an improv group, Kentucky Fried Theater, and another group at the Improv. But Alan and I were still working a little bit. We were doing clubs here and there and whatever. We had an agent, the whole thing. But there was a time when it was just time for us to part ways. Alan's real talent was in, as an executive. That's where his real creative work is. And I wanted to go more into acting. I studied acting at Tulane. I wanted to do plays and things like that. So, I found a couple of acting classes, schools, things like that. And, I was an actor for about 10 years. But I was always a writer, always a poet. And I got involved in a group of poets and writers in Venice, California, which was about a 30-minute drive from Hollywood, at a place called Beyond Baroque.
Oh, yes.
And that is really where, right now, all the old poets of Los Angeles, got my age, a little younger, a little older. We came through that. That was kind of like Greenwich Village in New York. And so many of the really great poets of Los Angeles, who are now, the older guys
Hmm.
and gals, came from that place. And I used to go there every night. I mean, every once a week, every Wednesday night. And eventually I became one of the leaders of the group, who would facilitate other people reading their poetry. But it was wild. I mean, it was a storefront in Venice. People who were stoned and drunk would come in off the street and want to figure out what the fuck was going on. One guy I remember was crazy and took off all his clothes. I mean, it was just a wild kind of experience, but it was always writing and poetry. And we would have guest poets come in from outside of LA, from New York and San Francisco and Chicago. And it was like we were learning about the world out there. This is, before the internet or anything like that.
Yeah.
So I was always writing and publishing and making my books and being creative in that sense. So even when the acting tapered off a bit and the comedy and all that other stuff, I was always writing, always poetry. That was really what I was going to be, no matter what. Brad Pitt, bless his heart, on Mars, I would have been writing poetry out of shit if I had to.
So what is did you develop a practice of writing? Like, is there anything, or you just love it so much that you just do it all the time automatically, or do you have a practice?
Well, okay. Anything anybody tells you who's a writer or an artist,
Mm-hmm.
the opposite is also true.
Okay.
And I always tried to find how artists worked. What was their habit? What was their schedule? How they did that? Because every artist has trouble with discipline. Because basically we're not disciplined. We're a little chaotic.
Yeah.
And we're always trying to find a way to keep our discipline, to get our work done. And that's not like us. It's like all of a sudden we got to go to the bank at 8 o'clock in the morning. It's not in our DNA.
Yeah.
So anybody that tells you what they do and what they find, it may not work for you. So don't take what I say as gospel, because I think I know more now than I did when I was 15. But basically, I think I know less. But I can still say what I think,
Yeah.
for better or for worse.
Please do.
I was always trying to find a way to be productive, because basically my personality was not productive that way. And I would try to chisel out a certain time of the day when I would be most productive. I'll bet you there are a lot of artists that something like this is similar. When you're young, it's late at night. So I wouldn't create until 1 o'clock in the morning. I would, if I had to take drugs or Dex or, something like that. My aunt had diet pills. So I used to steal her diet pills so I could stay up at night. I wouldn't really work till midnight, till about 4 in the morning. And then I would crash and then go to classes, at 8 o'clock.
Mm-hmm.
Then gradually, over the years, my productive time would shift around. I remember for about 5 years, I would get up at 4 in the morning and write till about 7. And then I would meet a couple of friends at the handball court at the YMCA and play handball at 7 in the morning. And then I'd go about my day. So I got my productive time early in the morning.
Yeah.
Then I began to get productive in the afternoon, which would have been the least productive time.
Yeah.
But so over the years, my body or my brain or something switched around. And I would say when I was about 50, it just became a kind of, it would be on a consistent basis whenever I got around to it. And I got around to it almost every day. It just was sort of like, taking a nap. Okay, I'm going to spend 2 hours in my study and I'm going to work on this. And I would do something my father always told me. He said, if you can't climb a fence because it's too high, throw your hat over the fence. And then in order to get your hat, you got to climb the fence.
That's a good one.
So I would invent these little projects that I was going to finish by a certain time. Like I was going to have a book of 40 poems by December. Okay. And then I would work backwards and figure out how many poems a week is that? How many poems a day? So, so like in May, mid-May, I had to get 10 written. And then by June or July, I had to have 20. I would work back from my end date and set these little minor goals, and that's what I would do. So now it's a little less digital. It's just more analog. I'm working on a book. I hope to get it out by the end of December or the beginning of 2024. When I get time, I work on it. Other times I work on something else. It just, I kind of go flit around. I got 3 books I'm working on. I got a book on James Joyce. I got a book on the Russian formalists. I got a new book of poetry. I just had a new book just come out. And I have a book of essays that I'm finishing up. So, and there's something else, and I can't even remember what it is. But, I'm working on them at different times and just moving along.
Can you tell
singing
us
the song?
That sounds great. I mean, it sounds like that's ideal. It's like in your bones now.
Yeah, but it's not ideal in the sense that, I have to do my classes.
Yeah.
I have to run errands. I got to go to the store. I got to go to the hardware store. Every day there's a bunch of things you got to do.
I know, it sucks.
It's life. The battery dies. I got to go get a blood test because I have this blood infection. I got to go to see this doctor about this. I mean, every day it's some shit you got to do.
I know.
It's
don't you hate it? It's horrible. Life gets in the way. Hey, I've got a question for you though. That's what you end up writing the poetry about, and the things, you know what I mean? That's what you end up. That's the work too.
About your life. It's about your imagination, whatever you're going to make it be.
Yeah.
Not only does every artist have to figure out how am I going to create technically, have some consistency, because I'm not naturally consistent. I'm not a banker. I'm not an insurance salesman. I'm not a doctor. I'm an artist, and I'm all over the place.
Yeah.
How can I find that? The other major thing every artist has to find is, who am I? What is my identity?
Yeah.
Whether you're painting or you're writing or you're a choreographer or you're a composer of music, what is my song? What is my viewpoint? And most important of all, what is my voice? I want my writing to have a voice that when people read it, without knowing who wrote it, they go, oh, that's a Jack Grapes poem. I want them to hear the music, the zither of my heart valve. Even
I love that.
they just hear it. Well, I was talking to a bunch of writers at a convention one time, and we were talking about how long does it take for a writer or a poet to find their voice. And we often talk about a sculptor or an actor finding their voice. Mm-hmm. We don't mean literally their voice, but we mean, who they are. Yeah. In writing, it's almost literal, your voice. And you know what we all decided? I mean, just sitting around having drinks, anywhere from 4 to 8 years.
Wow.
That, you're going to be doing a lot of painting, like Rothko. If you look at early Rothko paintings, and then at some point in his life, boom, there's Rothko. You see it.
Yeah.
Even with Van Gogh, you can look at Van Gogh, his early paintings. He copied Millet, and he copied, a lot of art, and then boom, all of a sudden, Van Gogh. And it takes a while.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is imitation. You're apprenticing. You're imitating. You're being influenced by, and then at some point, you break through all that, like breaking through a cocoon. And your voice emerges, but it doesn't emerge overnight. You can't just snap your fingers and make it happen. It's something you work at. And we decided between 4 and 8 years is the apprentice time it takes a writer or poet to find their voice. So if you're a poet or a writer out there and you're struggling, you're trying to write, you're writing stories and themes, and you're thinking up here instead of here in your soul, but it's going to come to you. It'll come to you. Just keep working, and know you're in process. You're not here to write a great poem. You're looking for your voice. Doesn't matter whether your poem is any good or not. You think you're trying to write a great story. No, you're trying to write that voice, that Raymond Carver or Chekhov or Toni Morrison. What is your essence? It's going to come to you, but you can't rush it and you can't make it happen. You can't, it's not like a rodeo where you can get that calf down and tied up and hogtied. Just go through it, trust your process, love, as Stanislavski said, the art in you, not you in the art. And if you trust it and you do it with love, it's going to come to you and it'll be pure and it'll be authentic. And after that, then it's the work. Then you got to do the fucking work. But you'll find it. You'll find it.
So is this what you call method writing? Is this your philosophy is about finding your voice? Can you talk to us about that? Your technique is called method writing. I don't know whether you gave it that name or whether it just...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, obviously I'm influenced as an actor by my studies in method acting, and also in improvisational theater, where you have theater games, where you don't walk onto a stage in improvisational theater with an idea or a story. You play the game. And most writers start with a story or an idea. They don't have a game. Well, method writing, like method acting, there are subtext. As an actor, you have text to deliver. But how do you deliver that text? What's the truth of it underneath? What's going on? What do you want as the character? How do you try to get it? What are your obstacles and conflicts in trying to get it? Obstacle, the fence outside of you, the conflict, the heart against itself inside of you. Every line, as a method actor, they call it, you break down the script. What do I want? Why am I trying to get it? You go through all of that technique stuff. And I study different techniques in method writing, method acting, not just Stanislavski, but other as well. So I thought, well, what's the core of acting? The core of acting is a simple thing. One, Spencer Tracy said it, and the other, my acting teacher said it. Spencer Tracy said, the secret of acting is to look the other actor in the eye and tell the truth. And my acting teacher, Milton Katselas, who passed away some years ago, he said to us, don't be an actor on stage. Be a person. Be a person. Be true. Be real. Before you're acting, be real. Come from that authentic place. Now, if you think it's easy to be a person when you're on stage in front of 500 people, or you're on a set with a big camera eye looking at your head and the boom man is behind him, that takes a lot of craft and focus and technique, because most people freeze up. So the actor learns how to be natural and real and authentic so that they're not acting. Well, let me correct that. It looks like they're not acting. They are acting. They create the illusion that they're real, but they're not acting. So I thought, okay, so with writing, you've got to find your voice. That's the same as be a person, same as acting. Find out who you are. Then you can use other techniques to make the scene that you're writing or playing have dynamic, tonal dynamics. So I developed a whole system in method writing. It's not the same as method acting, but the process underneath is similar, with this one distinction. In method acting, you have a text. The text already exists. You got to say those words. So you examine underneath the subtext. In method writing, we switch it. The text doesn't exist yet. We start with the subtext, with what's going on underneath, the techniques I teach you, and out of that will come your story, your poem, your novel, your screenplay, whatever it is you're going to write. Your comedy bit. I've worked with a lot of people who did comedy.
Comedy is the same way, and as far as acting goes, in that you have to create the illusion that you're just coming up with funny things off the cuff. And people who watch comedy think, oh, that person's really funny, but there's all this craft that goes behind it. The crafting of the material, and then also being able to deliver it as if it's just, coming to you.
People have no idea how much work goes into creating comedy.
Yeah.
And it is pretty brutal. But Mel Brooks once said the difference between comedy and tragedy is comedy is when you fall down a manhole, tragedy is when I fall down the manhole. But the point is, in comedy, if I fall down the manhole, you will laugh at it because I'm the other guy falling down the manhole.
Right.
So, you've got to know how to bring yourself into it. But there's another thing. You can write all the jokes you want, but in comedy, if you don't know who you are, see, we're back to that again. We're back to that authentic self. Who are you? Mm-hmm. When someone gets up to do, I used to work at the Comedy Store. I was one of a group of 4 of us. We were called the Comedy Store Players, and we would, every night we would get up and do, bits and whatever we did. Yeah. And there's an old saying. There's 2 kinds of comedians. One says funny things. The great ones say things funny.
Like it almost doesn't matter the words.
And people may not get that, but you can give anybody jokes.
Yeah.
But they're not laughing at your jokes. They're laughing at who you are.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the great comedians, they're funny. They're just funny. It wouldn't matter what they said. It's not that they have good jokes. It's they say things funny. Give them anything to say, and you'll laugh at it. Yeah. And then there's a great movie called Funny Bones with Jerry Lewis, Oliver Platt, and the genius of the film. God damn it, I can't remember his name right now. It's called Funny Bones.
Okay.
And Oliver Platt is Jerry Lewis's son, and Jerry Lewis plays a famous comedian. And he goes to Paris to look for his half-brother, who is this comedic genius. And Jerry Lewis flies to Paris to see Oliver Platt and is trying to get him to come home.
Lee Evans?
Lee Evans, that's it. Lee Evans. And he's a genius. Wow. Jerry Lewis says to Oliver Platt, son, there are those who say funny things and those who say things funny, and you're neither. So he really spares him. And he finds his half brother, and they find a way to discover comedy. But even as comedy, who are you? Who are you?
Yeah.
And that's just like writing. You got to find your voice, because your jokes will come out of who you are.
Yeah. Not
just because they're funny. And I remember playing at the Comedy Store, and we would be sitting there for hours waiting to go on. And we must have watched 20 comedians a night get up and do their stuff.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many of them just told jokes and they weren't funny. And the ones like, Freddie Prinze, God rest his soul, and other really great comics who went through the Comedy Store, they were funny. Not because they had good jokes, but because they were funny. They're just funny.
Yeah. But that is also, they found their voice, like you're saying.
They found their voice. They found who they were.
Yeah. And then they can communicate that to the audience. So the audience knows who they are. Even if they're not famous, they can communicate to the audience when they get up there.
Right. And you don't find that by thinking about it. You find it by playing comedy clubs and cafes and bars where there's only 4 people in the audience, night after night after night after night after night. And, you just learn. I can tell you 2 quick images. Richard Jones, who's a famous Chicago poet, came down to LA, and he and I both had our books coming out at the same time. And we were going to do a tour up and down the California coast, reading at universities and bookstores and cafes. And we had one cafe book, And as we were walking toward it, we could see through the big window, and there was only 3 people sitting in the whole cafe. And we were debating as to whether we should read for only 3 people. And we were hiding behind a car trying to figure out, should we do it or not?
Yeah.
And I didn't want to do it because I didn't want to read for 3 people. But I remembered the old comedy stuff. And I said, come on, Richard, we got to do it. We got to do it. Even if we bomb, we got to know what we're doing. And Alan and I, we once got a job, one of our first jobs. I don't know what they paid us. It was in New Orleans, to do a comedy, like 5-10 minutes at a strip joint in New Orleans.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
The stage of the strip joint was right behind the bar. So here's the bartender, there's the bar.
Yeah.
Right behind him up on the stage would be the stripper. So we had to go up early in the evening. We had to go up and do a comedy thing. Now, here you got guys, they're
Do
sitting there.
they want to see comedy at a strip club? They can't possibly.
Who wants to see fucking comedy? And I think the place was called the Jungle Room, and we called it the Swamp Room or something. Anyway, we said, listen, we got to get some of our friends to come and sit at the bar. So we need some shills, to get the place laughing.
Yeah.
So my brother and a bunch of his friends came. Now, do my brother and his friends who have seen us over and over and over again do our shtick around the house, do they think we're funny?
No.
No. What the hell did we tell them to come for? But what do we know? So there they are, sitting right at the bar. They're right there in front of us, and there's a few people, at the tables and chairs. We are comicking our asses off, and they're sitting there like that. It was disaster.
Why did they even have comedians at strip? I've heard that this is where a lot of the comedy happened before there were clubs. Was that strip joints?
They usually have an MC. They usually have an MC who, anytime he turns around, the pants he's wearing are as slick as porcelain in the seat. It's his only pair of pants. He's some guy lives, in a little, closet somewhere in the French Quarter. And he makes enough money to eat. And he's the MC, and he's usually skinny, and he's got a gaunt face and a beard. And now, from Louisville, Kentucky, welcome the woman who's got the biggest ass in the West. Blah, blah, blah. Here she is. And he would tell a joke every so often. And they were the worst. But so that's how we went in one day and auditioned to do that as a comedy team. Our comedy was sophisticated. He's telling raunchy jokes, and they're not funny, and he's not funny. So that's how we got that little gig,
Oh my God, that's great.
Strip joints do have MCs.
Yes, and I suppose that comedy could have developed out of that. I mean, some of the stand-up comedy developed in that way as well, because people were like, I got some stage time, so now I'm gonna. So I'm gonna jump ahead here, and I want you to tell me about this book, Wide Road to the Edge. Can you tell me
of the world?
Oh, to the edge of the world. Yes, sorry.
Of the world.
This
is
an amazing.
It's a book of haiku.
Yes.
And I don't know what possessed me, but a few years ago, I somehow wrote a few haiku. And my introduction in that book tells how I wrote haiku when I was in the 4th grade. Mm-hmm. I had a 4th grade teacher who taught us how to do haiku. And by the 5th grade, I was done with haiku. Yeah. Because 6th grade is when I started writing my detective stories. Mm-hmm. And for the rest of my life, whenever I read haiku, I always thought haiku was kind of frivolous. And it was something that kids do, or, people do, and they write cute little haiku, and it's never very profound. Mm-hmm. And what made me come back to it in my 70s, I don't know. But I got this notion that I was going to write a little book of haiku, because I always imagine what the size of the book is going to be. Mm-hmm. And then I kind of think of how the theme of the book will work.
You're so funny. It's like when you were a little kid. Like when you're a little kid, you're like, I'm going to make a book that's this big.
Book.
Yeah.
The book would be like that. Would be just like a flip book. You flip it and Mickey Mouse jumps around.
Yeah, I've missed
So I thought, okay, I'll have one haiku per page, and it'll be like 25 pages. and it'll be a little flip book, and I'll write 25 haiku. And I started writing the haiku, and I started reading the great haiku writers, Basho, Isa, Shiki, and the more modern ones. And Basho's most famous book is called Narrow Road into the Interior, because the hiking paths in Japan are very narrow. Yeah. And if you go into the northern part of Japan, it's kind of like the Rocky Mountains in the United States, very rugged. And when you start hiking into the northern part of Japan, they call it the interior. Mm-hmm. You meet bandits, you meet robbers, and so on, and it's very, you sleep on the ground, and it's very tough. But Basho, who lived in a shack, he wrote haiku as he hiked around Japan, all the way around the whole peninsula, the whole island. And he also wrote little prose sections that went with the poems. And then he titled it Narrow Road into the Interior, because it wasn't just the interior of the country, it was the interior of his soul. And they're really great haiku, famous haiku. So I thought, okay, I'll write a little book. I'll have 25 haiku, and I'll write a little introduction. It'll be like 5 pages, and it'll be prose, and I'll talk a little bit how I got back into writing haiku. Well, when I got done, I had 300 haiku, and I had 400 pages of a prose introduction.
That's the thing. Most of the book is the introduction.
Is the introduction. And yeah. I counted the paragraphs, and there were 200. I counted the chapters. I broke it up into little chapters. Yeah. There were 200 chapters, and there were 600 paragraphs and 300 haiku. And I thought, well, it can't be a perfect number like that. So I'm going to write one more haiku, which will be 301 haiku. I'll write one more paragraph, so it'll be 601 paragraphs, and one more chapter, so it'll be 201 chapters. So the book was published in a very limited edition. It's that thick. Mm-hmm. It's that small, as you can see. Oh. But it was almost unprintable, because you can't print this size, and then when you have to cut it, you ruin it. There's 100 copies out there that are collector's items. Then when I put it on Amazon, I had to change it to the size you have. Yeah. So if you hold that up, it's a little different. The back cover of the little book has the same picture that you've got.
Tell me about that.
That guy, the barrel maker.
Yeah.
One plank at a time, and the barrel turns. But I titled mine not Narrow Road into the Interior, but Wide Road to the Edge of the World. In other words, the creative process is also into the interior, but it's also a wide road. You can do anything you want. You can do haiku, you can do philosophy, you can write essays, you can write poems, you can write stories, screenplays, drama. It's a wide road to the edge of the world. And as writers and the students I teach, don't box yourself in with the idea that whatever you're doing has to have a certain form and a certain structure, and you can't go outside that structure. It is a wide road to the edge of the world, and go for it.
I want to ask you something about writing, because writing feels like a solitary kind of thing, but you've made a community out of the people that take your classes and the people that write. How important is community for writers? And also, how do you know when you have something good that you've written? Those are a 2-part question. They're kind of totally different questions.
Yeah, I'll answer the second one first. Okay. You don't always know, but you have an inkling. And if you don't have an inkling, then you should. You should, because there's a place where you got to be honest with yourself and not just be false modest. You can tell when a work has got something going for it. Yeah, it may need some work. It may need some editing. Everything has to have editing. Everything goes through many drafts, but you can feel that seed crystal. You know you got something. So sometimes sometimes you don't. The odd thing about it is, though, Joel, is that some of the best first drafts I ever wrote didn't get much better. Some of the worst first drafts that I started working on, they got really, really good.
Really?
So even the bad first drafts can end up being better
Yeah.
than the good first draft that you don't do much work on because it's good enough.
Because it's just suddenly good. I remember when I was a little kid, I was making a sculpture out of some clay, and it just kind of accidentally looked like a bobcat. And then I just fired it. I fired it up, and
Yeah.
my mom has it. It sits there, and I was like, oh, it just God made it or something.
How many of us have ever doodled
Yeah,
on a page and it starts to look like something,
yeah. And
and
you're
then we
like,
kind of finish it up? Now, the first question you asked was about community
oh, yeah,
and being alone,
yeah.
the solitude.
Hmm.
Um, Certainly, every artist at some point has to um, take care of their solitude.
Hmm.
If you let it get eaten away by the community, you will lose your center. So that part of you that is alone, that is solitary, take care of it. Others will want to break in sometime, and you have to know when you have to be alone. You're not always alone because you're working on something. Sometimes you just need to be alone to process yourself, to process your oneness. And uh, as I've gotten older, I've needed more of that time than when I was younger, because I'm a social type as well. You don't do comedy to a wall,
Right.
you know.
Right.
And so you're not just a class clown. You're funny at the parties. You become a community person, and by the grace of the universe, I've always had a community from the time I was pretty young, a young teenager, whether it was my school or another group I belonged to that was a Jewish fraternity. Um, I always had a community, and I found that I could actually become stronger with the energy of the community. That being alone only by itself did not necessarily recharge you in a way that was promising. That sometimes you have to be part of a community,
Hmm.
because when you're part of that community, the energy of the whole community gives you energy. But
That's
then
for
you have
sure.
to know when to go and be alone,
Yeah.
and then you have to know when to get back to the community. So the classes I've created is because I created a community for others, but for myself as well. And I do have a community of writers and friends. And I've always had some community, the theater group I might have been involved in, whatever it might be. I've always fed off community. I like being with a lot of people. I like it.
Hmm.
But then there are times when I want to be alone and I want to be with myself. And
Yeah.
so, therefore, that push and pull for the artist to be solitary, have solitude, and to be with others, community, that solidarity with others, I think is at the root of the creative process. And Albert Camus has a story about an artist who is painting his masterpiece toward the end of his life, and no one is allowed to see it until he's finished it. And he dies, and then they go into his apartment, and in the closet he's got the easel with his canvas and a wet cloth hanging over the oil, and they lift up the cloth, and he only has one word written on that canvas, but the middle letter, they can't tell whether it's a T or a D. A T like Thomas,
Yeah.
or a D like
Dog.
Denver.
Yeah.
They can't quite tell. So the word he wrote in French, remember it's a French story,
Yeah.
SOLIDAIRE or
Oh,
SOLITAIRE.
that's so good.
Is the word solitaire
Yeah.
to be alone, or is the word solidaire to be in
Solidarity.
solidarity with others?
That's so good.
And that to me is what we just talked about.
Oh my God, I love that. That is so.
It's
Yeah, that's a good
cool.
one. Uh, I would love it if you would read one of your poems for us on the show. I don't know if you have something that you can read for us. Give us a
Let's
little
see what I've
poetry
got here.
therapy.
I have one of my books here, which is it's actually the copy that when I read, it's got, down here, the reading copy.
Yeah.
It's called The Naked Eye.
Mhm.
The poem in there about a friend brought over his telescope one night, and we went outside, and he set it up on the corner, and we could see Jupiter and Saturn and Venus. And people at the night were walking by, and they would say, "What are you guys telling? Why you want to look at Jupiter?" So we were looking at it.
Mhm.
But I titled the poem "The Naked Eye." In other words, what you can see with the naked eye,
Yeah.
as opposed with the telescope. So it's called "The Naked Eye." It's new and selected poems, 1987, 212.
Great.
And I'm going to read the last poem in the book, okay?
Terrific. I'm going to give you the stage too. It's just going to be you.
You're going to do what?
I'm going to give you the stage. We'll all be here.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
This poem is called "The Man in Charge of Watering." The summer sun, strong and bright, sits down on the bricks in my front yard. Cars which have nothing to do with bricks go by on the street heading home. It's Wednesday afternoon, middle of the week, when you can put everything you'd planned on Monday back on the back burner. A lady goes by. I nod and smile and say hello. She's carrying a bag of groceries. I think she lives down the block, but I should go back inside. The sun's hot on my face and I'm not wearing my hat. Lori admonishes me, "Don't forget to wear your hat." I came outside to fill the fountain and forgot to wear my hat. Now I'm just standing here, looking around, saying hello to the neighbors as they pass by. When we first bought this house, when Josh was 2 years old, I used to go outside after the sun had gone down and hose the grass on the front lawn and side lawn. Ah, such a peaceful time. And the back spray from the hose cooled everything down. I was Mr. Homeowner, watering his lawn. There are flowers blooming here that Lori knows the names of, but I can't seem to remember their names. Jasmine, bougainvillea, true geraniums. I can't keep track of them all. I've tried, but the names elude me. Even the grass has a name, but I've forgotten that too. I think this is what heaven will be like. Anytime I want, I'll be able to water the lawn. All my friends will walk by. I'll nod, say hello, watch them pass along, going wherever people go in heaven. I won't have to do anything but water the lawn. And the water. Oh, you used to see the water in heaven. Crystal clear, light as a feather, so to speak. Diamonds of light. The back spray will cool my face and head. On the grass. Whoa. You'd think grass in heaven wouldn't need watering, but you are in for quite a surprise. Everything up here needs watering. Even the bricks that sit in the sun getting hot. Even God, who soaks up all our prayers. Even God will need a spray or two to cool down. I'll be the waterer, the man in charge of watering everything and everyone, the man spraying water in heaven. Shoot, I lost my place. The man in charge of watering everything and everyone, the man spraying water in heaven. That'll be my job. When God comes by and asks how I'm doing, I'll say, fine, just fine. Then I'll turn and ask, need a little watering? And God will nod, say, sure, soak me down. Just don't wet the groceries. And I'll give God a good spray. That'll be my job in heaven. I'll be the man in charge of watering God. That's it.
That was beautiful. That was beautiful. Thanks so much for doing that.
That was weird.
That's great. I've watched some of you reading poetry online. That you have when you read poetry out in the public, and you do have a voice and you have a way of being, and even if you lose your place because you're such a solid human being, like that's part of the charm of it. That's part of the performance of it. And, a lot of times you make light of that. And I just love that about you. You're such a comedian kind of person too in the poetry. Like you've got so much joy and so much humor that you bring to it that it just makes it so dynamic and just a pleasure to watch you read your poetry, and a pleasure to hear the words that you've crafted. So thank you so
Bill,
much.
thank you. And even now when I read the poem, I get a kick out of the line, God says, fine, soak me down, just don't wet the groceries. And I have this image of God, like the lady at the beginning of the poem who's carrying groceries home, and
Yeah.
God is bringing groceries, That line always I get a kick out of. And I don't remember writing it. I don't know where it came from, but
Yeah.
it is a funny line,
Oh my God. Well, I have so much enjoyed having you on the show. I think I pulled a muscle laughing. I was laughing so much. Sometimes you just laugh so hard that you're like, oh. So anyway, we're going to dance this thing out because on our show, at the end, we play a song, we dance, and I hope that you'll come back at some point. I hope someday I'm going to take your class. Because it just sounds like a gift. People can go to jackgrapes.com, see all the information that's there. There's a lot of classes. People can take classes from wherever they are because it's Zoom, right? I mean, there's Zoom classes.
Yeah, Zoom.
So I highly recommend that, of course, and that you read the testimonials. And I have to say, you have to put on your top hat, get a box of popcorn, and watch this play online. Give yourself an hour and a half and watch this thing. And Matt Wright said, got any grapes? Because we have a joke on the show that the punchline is, got any grapes? So today, we got some grapes. All right, so let's head into the thing. Dance break time. This is a classic from Jefferson Airplane. I don't even know whether I can play this video on the show, but I hope they're going to be cool because it's just so goofy and fun and has a kind of a, I guess it's sort of the way Jack is. Goofy, fun, and really, really, really talented and really well crafted. So let's get it happening.
God, I'm going to send that to my mother.
All right. Here we go. So this is a band called Molly Tuttle and the Golden Highway. Hope it doesn't get us banned, but anyway, it's just so good. And of course, White Rabbit.
Yep.
I love the way they're all dressed like Alice in Wonderland. We'll just play a little bit of this. Don't wet the groceries, people.
One pill makes you larger and one pill makes you small. And the ones that mother gives you
Love it. They got some banjo,
don't do
everything.
anything at all. Go ask
It almost says play the whole thing. I don't know. I might get banned
She's
if I play the whole
10
thing.
feet tall.
We'll give it a shot, though.
And if you go chasing rabbits and you know you're gonna fall, tell 'em a hookah smoking caterpillar has given you the call. Call Alice.
Yeah, we got the nail through the head.
She was just small.
Is that a lute? All right. Oh my God, it's magic! Ow! Mental floss. I think you're a magician. poetry, and we have violin solos on this show. It's like no other show.
When the men on the chessboard get up and tell you where to go, and you just had some kind of mushroom, and your mind is moving along, go ask Alex, I think she'll know.
All right, everybody. Thanks so much for being on the show, Jack. Thanks, everybody, for being here. And we'll see you all next week on Lunch Therapy.